The Fed just cut interest rates and quietly announced it'll buy $40 billion worth of T-bills over the next 30 days. They won't call it QE, but the balance sheet is already turning up. The dollar is rolling over, and liquidity is flowing back into a system that's been breaking for years. This isn't just a monetary pivot, it's a window into why the American middle class is collapsing, why saving no longer works, and why entire generations are falling into a financial reality that feels more like a casino than an economy. Today, we're going to walk straight into the core of the problem and follow the thread that ties the Fed's latest move to a new shocking poverty line, to the rise of gambling culture, and finally, to the one system that realigns all of it. Welcome to No Second Best, the show where conviction meets reality and reality points straight to Bitcoin. I'm your host, Hurley. Now let's get into it. Yesterday, the Fed cut interest rates by 25 basis points, which was a move expected by the markets. But the biggest announcement of the FOMC meeting was their plan to buy $40 billion of T-bills in the next 30 days. Now, they'll probably call this reserve management, and they'll insist it's temporary, and they'll swear it's not QE. But markets don't listen to labels, they listen to flows. And if you're wondering where this puts us in the printing cycle, it's right here. We're now at the same point that the last liquidity wave began, the same pattern the Fed kicked off in 2020. And right on cue, the dollar index is cracking lower. A falling dollar isn't just a macro footnote, it's the market pricing in rate cuts, balance sheet expansion, and political pressure on monetary policy. When the dollar weakens like this, global capital tends to rotate towards hard assets. And here's the wild part. Bitcoin already climbed more than 750% while the Fed was tightening and shrinking its balance sheet for 3 straight years. If Bitcoin could do that during contraction, what do you think happens when the printing cycle restarts? And meanwhile, politics is doing its part. President Trump recently said publicly that the next Fed chair will be expected to cut rates immediately.
I want to ask about interest rates because a lot of Americans agree with you that they're too high. You're going to pick a new Fed chair soon. Is it a litmus test that the new chair lower interest rates immediately?
Yes. Well, this guy should too, but I think he's a combination of not a smart person and doesn't like Trump.
That wasn't a hint, it was a declaration. The era of the illusion of the politically independent central bank fooling anybody is over. We are officially in the regime where it's common knowledge that interest rates exist to serve debt survival, not discipline. Rate cuts, balance sheet expansion, a weakening dollar, these aren't isolated events. They're symptoms of a system that's failing the people it was designed to protect. And if you want to understand the stakes, you have to understand the shocking math of the middle class in 2025. Last week, a Substack article exploded across the internet, one of those rare pieces that cuts through politics entirely because the math is undeniable. It laid out in brutal detail why the American middle class feels poorer every year, why saving no longer works, and why the official poverty line is basically a relic from a world that no longer exists. The author of the Substack was Mike Green, one of Wall Street's most respected macro analysts, and a guy who has spent decades modeling liquidity and market structure, but who also happens to ironically be one of Bitcoin's loudest critics. And yet in this piece, Mike Green delivered one of the clearest, most devastating illustrations of the fiat problem we've heard in years. His main argument is that the official poverty line of $31,000 is a fantasy. It was built on a formula from 1963 when food took up a third of a family's budget. Today, food is only 5 to 7%. The things modern families actually can't live without, housing, childcare, healthcare, transportation, have inflated 4, 8, sometimes 15 times faster than CPI would ever admit. So when you update the formula honestly, the real threshold where a family hits crisis isn't 31K. It's 94K in an average city and 130 to 150K in a typical metro. That's the new poverty line that reflects today's reality. And worse, the moment you try to climb the ladder, benefit cliffs crush you. You make a little more and you become poorer. The unfortunate truth is that when money breaks, the middle class breaks with it. And when saving becomes impossible, people stop trying to save at all. And that's where the next turn in our story comes. Swan CEO Cory Klippsten said something last week on Swan Signal Live that perfectly captured the dystopian path our society is drifting towards. And it's not accidental. It's the natural outcome of broken incentives.
And so it's just this horrifying, dark version of the future where essentially they want finance and betting and scambling, the portmanteau of scamming and gambling, which we can get into right after this, to rise from something like 20% of GDP, which is where it is in the US right now. And they want that to be like 35 or 40% of GDP. It's non-productive, it's extractive, it's negative sum by definition. There is a place for capital allocation, and that's where, you know, people with my training and John's career should be doing things, and that should be like, you know, 3 to 5% of the economy is allocating capital, and that's what finance ought to be in a healthy society. And we're moving in the exact opposite direction of what is good and healthy for humans. So it's really interesting. Like literally, Bitcoin is this direction, and the other one is a really dark and gross dystopian path that people are just charging down as fast as possible.
When money erodes faster than you can earn it, when assets inflate faster than you can save, when wages lag while debt explodes, speculation becomes the only perceived way out. Games replace goals, leverage replaces labor, and gambling becomes a cultural operating system.
I think it's actually the people that have basically given up that are gambling, which is, you know, that's why gambling has always been much more of a lower class thing. That's who plays the numbers, you know, and does the pull tabs and all that stuff at the bar. Like that's the ones who rush to the bar and drink away their paycheck on Fridays and don't take care of their family, and they don't save because they just don't see a way out. Like, you know, having $10 excess from your paycheck just isn't going to get you out of it. And so, you know, gambling is classically the opiate of the masses, and gambling exploded at the end of the Roman Empire. And that was the real sport in Circus Maximus was the gambling on the chariot teams and the gladiators and everything. And, you know, but again, it's always negative sum for the participants because the house takes a rake.
Yeah.
And there's no chance of a win-win situation when you think about prediction markets, which are gambling for almost all participants. So yeah, it's just ugly. And this is, you know, something we've noted for a long time is that, you know, crypto ads and gambling ads have the exact same audiences. They have the exact same media buy. So prediction markets, crypto casinos, sports gambling, three-headed chimera monster trying to eat all of the excess cash of everyone that is basically just plugged into this weird matrix where that's supposedly looked down as like a, you know, if not a healthy activity, like at least normalized. And it's not normal, and it's not a good way to spend your time. But I think this is a little bit more of a moral argument and a social argument than saying, hey, there's nothing else that they could do. Because it is a little different than just like buying and holding stocks, you know, which you probably could do. It's nihilist, basically. It's giving up.
Yep.
And it's just using your money for entertainment and a rush more than anything else.
This is sadly exactly where we are. Sports gambling surging, prediction markets exploding, meme coins, perpetuals, tokenized stocks, leverage on leverage. A society searching for dopamine because money no longer provides direction and they're desperate for a way out. Everyone is chasing that Hail Mary, that one lucky break that might save them from a future where working hard still isn't enough to live, let alone thrive. And one of the clearest voices on this problem is Seb Bunney, author of The Hidden Cost of Money, and a researcher who focuses on how broken incentives reshape culture, behavior, and even identity. Seb joined What Bitcoin Did recently to talk about the second-order effects of inflation and financialization, and why people aren't acting irrationally at all. They're simply responding to a monetary system that's quietly rewiring how we think, work, and navigate the world.
I think number go up technology is what has drawn a lot of people in. People are like, you know what, I'm struggling in life. Hey, there's this thing that just keeps going up. Maybe that's going to make my life a little easier. Then they get into it, and all of a sudden it's the famous saying, you come for the gains and you kind of stay for the revolution. And what I'm realizing is it's just like previously, as you kind of went down the rabbit hole and you peeled back this number go up technology, you're like, my God, this thing, to me, the way that I kind of see it is, although it is digital money, the irony of it being digital money is that it gets us to stop thinking about money, and it gets us to start thinking about how we're showing up as individuals and have a little more capacity to look inwards and figure out like, what are my values? What do I want to contribute? How do I create value and such? And what I'm finding is that it's almost like people are coming into Bitcoin and all they want to talk about is just the financial aspect. Whereas to me, what I find really, when you kind of really dig deep into the financial side of the world, the financialization of everything, I would argue that financialization is only a byproduct of broken money. It's when our money no longer holds value that we have a whole industry crop up trying to create products that preserve purchasing power. Whereas if we actually just had money that preserved purchasing power, you wouldn't have this whole financialized sector out there, which is arguably one of the biggest sectors in the world.
What Seb is describing here is the inversion of a healthy economy. In a world with sound money, most people would spend their lives building families, building careers, building communities, building long-term plans. Finance would be a small tool set in the background, allocating capital efficiently so real work can flourish. But when the money stops working, everything flips. People aren't choosing to become part-time traders or weekend speculators. They're being pushed into it. Not necessarily because they want adrenaline or excitement, but because the path their parents followed, work, save, advance, it simply doesn't work anymore. So the economy adapts. Production takes a back seat. Speculation becomes the ladder you have to climb because saving no longer gets you anywhere. This is exactly what Mike Green's poverty analysis reveals. When the cost of participation outruns wages and savings, people are forced onto riskier and riskier ground. And that brings us to the clearest, most relatable expression of broken incentives, the housing crisis.
So if that's the issue, if it's individuals that are buying up these houses because they have excess capital, now you've got to ask, well, why are they buying houses? And he was just like, well, just because they have money. And I was just like, that's not necessarily true. Like, they could just keep their money in the money. And he's just like, I hadn't thought about that. Why are they not keeping their savings in the money? Well, it's because their money is losing purchasing power. Well, why is the money losing purchasing power? Oh, because our money supply is expanding. Well, why is the money supply expanding? Oh, because we've got a central bank with lax monetary policy. And then as you basically just keep asking why, you get down to the root that we have a monetary system that because of its behavior, the currency is losing purchasing power. So no one is incentivized to save in the currency anymore. Everyone is pushed out into all of these various assets. And so things like real estate and things like farmland that were once used for their utility purpose, putting a roof over a family's head, being able to grow crops, being able to raise animals, is now being used instead as a store of value. And they're no longer using them even for their utility purpose. And so where I live in Whistler, 61% of houses are empty, yet we're facing a housing crisis. And it's because people don't care about them for their utility purpose. It's simply an investment to them. And that's a byproduct of broken money. And so at the face of it, they're like, well, now we've got to regulate this. We've got to stop foreign investors. Okay, no, maybe we've got to stop. People aren't allowed a second home or a third home, or maybe we've got to increase taxes. And it's like, no, let's just stop printing money so people can actually just save back in the currency again.
This is the perfect example of how money distorts our reality. When the dollar loses purchasing power year after year, people stop treating homes as places to live and start treating them as lifeboats. Assets become the escape hatch from inflation. Homes become savings accounts. Investors pile in because they have no other way to preserve value. Young families get priced out because the system tells everyone that the only way to secure the future is to front-run the next wave of currency debasement. This isn't malfunction. This is exactly how fiat systems behave when the unit of account breaks. But here's the important part. If broken money distorts behavior, only honest money can realign it.
I think what Bitcoin's scarcity model, 21 million, does is it ends up creating and kind of almost forcing a bit of like a free market. If you as an individual, you've got this permissionless, trustless monetary system that preserves purchasing power, what ends up happening is no longer can a system rely on intervention. Value flows to where value is being created. And that is unbelievably important. If we can force a free market where capital flows to the individuals that are creating products and services that benefit society, then I think that we start to, as I discussed previously, we start to like realign these monetary incentives. And so if we start to realign these monetary incentives, what does that do? On the government side of things, if a government has to be fiscally responsible, well, it's now got to start thinking long term. So it's starting to think long term. It's going to look at its balance sheet and be like, where are my current biggest expenses? Well, it's probably in like healthcare. I'm spending so much on this sick society. So maybe we need to actually think about how do we create a healthy society? And then it will look at what other expenditure do I have? Well, we've got a lot of energy expenditure. A lot of money goes into being able to support and fuel this economy. So how do we actually create a more efficient society? Well, maybe we need to actually direct more capital, which we do have, from saving, not necessarily from intervention and debasing the currency, but actually towards realigning the incentives and creating more efficient societies. And so I think that ultimately, Bitcoin realigns a lot of the monetary incentives, not only for government, but I also think for the individual to just be more curious and to just dive into a lot of these subjects. And I think that it is that kind of reality alignment where everybody is constantly striving to redraw the map as close to the territory as possible, that I think that that's where we move towards abundance. That's where we move towards kind of prosperity.
Human behavior doesn't exist in a vacuum. It follows incentives. When money rewards consumption, people consume. When money rewards leverage, people lever up. When money rewards gambling, gambling becomes the norm. When money punishes savings, nobody saves. But when money is stable, when it honors time, when it protects effort, when it can't be diluted by political cycles or temporary liquidity programs, human behavior is given the room to move towards curiosity, patience, craftsmanship, long-term thinking, family building, and sovereignty. This is the irony in Mike Green's critique. He sees the sickness perfectly, but not the cure, because the cure is a monetary system that does the one thing fiat can't: align incentives with reality. Bitcoin is not another financial product. Bitcoin is an exit ramp, an incentive realignment layer, a system that restores the behaviors a healthy society depends on. And I just love how Cory said it. Bitcoin is money, crypto is finance. And finance is the extraction layer built on top of broken money. This is exactly why Bitcoiners don't spend their time predicting which token will pump. They spend their time rebuilding the base layer of civilization, a fixed supply, incorruptible monetary foundation that restores the very behaviors the fiat system destroys. When money is honest, savings work again. When savings work, gambling loses its appeal. When gambling fades, society has room to heal. If you're watching this and realizing the monetary regime is shifting under your feet, the incentives, the liquidity cycles, the real cost of savings, and you don't want to navigate it alone, then Swan Private was built for you. Swan Private works with families, individuals, and businesses who want to build a long-term Bitcoin position with real guidance, real custody solutions, and a strategy built for moments exactly like this. If you want to understand this transition and a partner that will help you build generational wealth, head to swan.com/no-second-best to learn more and to talk to a member of the team today. Because at the end of the day, the story isn't about rate cuts or balance sheets or the dollar index. It's about what kind of system we want to build our lives on. A system that degrades effort or a system that honors it. A system that forces speculation or a system that restores saving. A system that treats the middle class as collateral or a system that gives them a future again. So what do you think? Do you feel the middle class is being priced out of its own future? Does the Fed have any path left that doesn't lead to more inflation and more financial repression? Do you see Bitcoin as the only escape from this death spiral? Or is there another solution? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this one, hit the like button and share it with a friend lost in the gambling culture. And don't forget to subscribe to the Swan Bitcoin channel for more high signal content every day. Thanks for watching, and remember, there is no second best money.